Hi everyone, and welcome to Youth Leader Weekend.
We wish we could be with all of you at camp, but we have a great weekend ahead of us.
That's right, and we are so thankful that you have committed some of your precious time to be here so that you can be more effective in what you do. What you do as a leader of young people is vital to the Army and to the kingdom.
We know that this is a difficult calling, and that's why we have taken time to pour into your life and your ministry. And we want you to know that you are not alone. One of the great things about being a youth leader and having Youth Leader Weekend is the chance to be reminded that there are tons of leaders across our division who experience the same struggles and difficulty as you.
And today we want to remind you that's still true. Right now there are well over 100 other leaders joining us at watch parties or at home, all with one goal in mind. How do we reach young people more effectively?
This last year has forced us to cancel or change just about everything. So for the next few sessions, we want to take a deeper look at our ministries so that we can use this time of crisis to refine and refocus what to do to help our young people look more and more like Jesus.
And to do that, we have brought the big guns. In just a few moments, you're going to hear from a giant in youth ministry. Tom Shefchunas will be drawing on his many years of experience to help us revolutionize our approach to youth ministry. But this isn't something you can just watch. You will be asked by Chef many times over these next sessions to take some time to think and discuss. We will have a clock on there to give you some time, but if you need to stop, if you need to pause, please feel free and then start again when you're ready. If you're at home and you want to discuss, our team will be with you on YouTube in the chat room, and we would love to interact. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get notified when we post new content. And one more thing, if Chef mentions a book or a resource, check the description for a link.
So now it's time to do my favorite thing. Sit back, relax, and grab some index cards and a pen. Let's let our revolution begin.
Okay, so many of us have been doing church, well, differently. Sunday mornings have become a bit more casual. Living rooms and coffee shops have become sanctuaries. And fellowship has a new, less personal touch. It hasn't been easy. Yet, here we are, gathering, worshiping, learning, being the church. Now more than ever, we're reminded of a simple truth. The church is not a building. It's the body of Christ. It isn't built with brick and mortar, but with faith and hope. In the midst of uncertainty, our calling remains the same: to share the truth of the gospel with a world God loves. Throughout history, the church has prospered in difficult times, and today is no different. We are still the church. We're just doing things a bit differently.
Hey everybody, Tom Shefchunas here. I am super excited to be a part of Youth Leader Weekend. It's been really fun planning this. In fact, I was talking to Captain Jonathan really about how to make the most of our time together, and I hope this time serves you well. I know that it has blessed me simply by kind of putting the information together and thinking through just this past year and what you all are facing. I love what you do. I think it's one of the most important jobs in the world. And again, I'm honored that you would have me here. My name is Tom Shefchunas. If you haven't heard, most people call me Chef. You should feel free to. Just a few things you need to know about me. I've been doing education or student ministry for I don't know, we're at 27 years, I guess. I just turned 48. And that's all I've ever done. At the age of 28, I became a high school principal, which I only tell you because it wasn't a great choice for me personally, nor was it for the school. But I developed a debilitating social condition during that time, and I like to call it angry resting face. And so if you're wondering, why is he mad while he's talking? It's that I'm relaxed and we're talking about some really important stuff, and I'm excited to be talking about it. Another thing you need to know about me is, though I worked in one of the largest churches in the country, North Point, for 13 years, I also grew up in a tiny church. In fact, my first memories as a human being are the day we built our church. And we built our church by taking one half of the church, picking it up on a crane and setting it on cinder blocks, and the other half and basically bolting them together. It was a double wide trailer for the most part. I remember we actually put the steeple on top. So when I'm training churches, I'm thinking big and small all the time. In fact, when I'm talking to big churches, it's often, hey guys, I'm trying to help you think like a small church or help you feel like a small church for the people who are going there. So I love small churches. I think you have an advantage in a lot of ways for what's really important. Another thing you have to know about me, and maybe most important, is I am husband to Julie and father to Mac, Joey, and Coop. Now, Mac is 17. He's in there, and then there's Joey. Sorry, there's a glare all over this. There's a window behind the screen. That's my JoJo. She looks just like me, and for some reason, though I make an average-looking middle-aged man, I'm a super cute 15-year-old girl, and then that is Coop, and that is my bride, Julie. We've been married for 23 years. Most important thing that I have been blessed and get to do. So that's what you need to know about me. When Captain Jonathan and I talked, he talked about the fact that if we were doing this live, we'd all be hanging out and you would stop me and interrupt me during the talks, which is my favorite environment. And though we can't do that, that's why we kind of did this setting, kind of laid back. So I'd love for you to put your feet up, grab a cup of coffee, whatever it is. If you're with a group of people, stop, hit pause, and talk about something. If you're alone, feel free to stop, get up, and do something else, or walk with me around the house as we talk. I'm good for all of that, but this is my space. This is my 80 square feet for Dad. This is my, again, 10 by 8. I call it my nest because it overlooks the cul-de-sac where we live. That was the glare of the window that you see, and I walled that in a few years ago, and this is Dad's spot. It's the only one. In fact, I'll show you on these shelves back here. It's all youth ministry stuff. In fact, check this out. This is a stone apple that I used in a talk with middle schoolers, where I got to throw this through a giant mirror as an illustration of what happened at the fall. That was fun. This is a giant T-Rex that a friend of mine got for me because I do a talk about leaders and how young leaders need to lead, and T-Rex has got to hunt, if you know what movie I'm talking about, and he actually roars or stomps. This is a bobblehead chef that my staff gave me at North Point when I left there. That was kind of fun, and this is like my most fun thing. This is a little magnet of my wife when she was in high school as a ballerina. She'd kill me if you saw that, but she goes back with the bobblehead chef, which is fun. What is this? This is, a school in Korea used some stuff from Lead Small, and so I got to go there, and this is actually at the DMZ in the demilitarized zone. I'm standing above North Korean soil in this picture, and that's a South Korean soldier who looks very mean. So super, super fun ministry memories and stuff like that. So welcome to my nest, and let's hang out. Third thing is, I love our theme. Our theme is revolution, and I think that's huge. I'm a big fan of revolutions and reformations and movements throughout history. I'm always wondering how it happened and who actually did that and how it works. And this is no exception. I think history will show this year as a time when tons of revolutions took place. How we work, how we connect, how we meet. I mean, all of that is really important. And this year is no exception. But I think what's interesting is most revolutions don't start because of a pandemic. Most revolutions don't start, although some do, because of a discovery. For instance, if you discovered penicillin, that would start a medical revolution. But most social revolutions don't start that way. In fact, revolutions, reformation, and movements are rarely the result of new information. But they are the result of thinking differently about things we already know. Let me say that again, maybe more clearly. Revolutions, reformations, and movements are rarely the result of new information, but thinking differently about what we already know. Now, what do I mean about that? I actually have a few examples of revolutionaries. This one here, anybody know who that is? 3, 2, 1. I bet you don't, but if anybody said Eli Whitney, they would have been correct. And the thing I liked about Eli Whitney, or the thing you know about Eli Whitney, is Eli Whitney invented you probably just said cotton gin, but he also invented an idea. He invented what is now called interchangeable parts. But before Eli Whitney, when you built a rifle, you literally built the rifle from the beginning to end, and it was this unique piece of art. Well, the problem with that is when you pull the trigger and it breaks, you've got to create a trigger that works with that one gun. And Eli Whitney thought differently. He thought simpler is really the way I like to think about it. He thought, is there a small piece of this problem I can solve? And he wondered, if all triggers were the same, if all hammers were the same, if all stocks were the same in the gun, could we build a rifle that can quickly be interchanged and fixed? And that started a revolution, the Industrial Revolution. In fact, an Industrial Revolution was great and terrible for lots of reasons, but it was all started by someone not discovering something, but thinking differently. Here's another one. Let's see if you know who this guy is. Anybody know? This is one of my favorite examples. This guy's name is Kobayashi. And Kobayashi revolutionized the competitive eating field. In fact, he was the first guy who beat the famed Joey Chestnut in the hot dog eating contest on July 4th. And the way Kobayashi did that is not that he invented something, but that he thought differently. In fact, he thought backwards. He asked the question, is there another approach to this problem? He thought to himself, if I had to eat as many hot dogs as possible, how would I do that? And he looked at the rules and he realized there weren't rules about how you had to eat the hot dogs. And so he revolutionized that. And if you watch him, you'll see him grab all of the 4 or 5 or 6, it's ridiculous, hot dogs, and he just munches them and bites them and chunks them up and gets them down as fast as he can. But the secret to Kobayashi's success is there were no rules about when you had to eat the bread or how you ate the bread. And now you'll see he'll sit there with a giant glass of water. He wads up the bread and he just puts it in the water, and therefore he can eat it faster. It was the dry bread that slowed the whole process down. And he didn't invent anything. He just rethought and thought differently. That was Kobayashi. Another revolutionary, one of my favorites. Anybody know who this is? You'd have to be a business geek to know who this is, but this is Cheryl Batchelder, and she was the CEO of Popeyes. She's actually the CEO that turned Popeyes around. Popeyes chicken was about gone years ago, and now they're back, and they're back in a big way, but she was the CEO who changed all of that. She thought upside down, and she asked the question, am I assuming all the solutions are coming from the top? So as a CEO, instead of just trying to have top-down decisions, she went to the bottom and looked up the mountain and saw who was taking cover and figured out how to really help this organization become what it is today. And now they have, you can debate this, first or second best chicken sandwich on the market. I really like it. Another revolutionary, a really important one these days, is Dr. Martin Luther King. And the way he didn't invent something, but he thought differently. And that's how he got this idea moving forward. I like to say that MLK thought beyond. He was, in a situation where he needed to solve a civil rights issue. But when he thought about it and when he dreamt, he thought beyond solving the civil rights issue. In fact, in his speech, I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King didn't describe a world where there weren't civil rights issues. He described a world beyond. He described a world where little black kids and little white kids would play together and not even understand the concept of a civil rights issue. And that's really what people grabbed onto. So have I set my goal too low, I think, is the way a revolutionary like MLK thinks. Another one who you may or may not know. How are you doing on history? Anybody know who this is? Well, this is Luther. And I like to say that Luther thinks irreverently, not irreverence towards God, but irreverence towards the system. Luther asked the question, I think, in the midst of the Catholic Church, where or how has this system limited my perspective? And he thought beyond it. He got above it and looked down and said, wait a minute. And he created what we all know as the Protestant Revolution by thinking that way. And again, revolutions aren't the results of discoveries. Revolutions, reformations, and movements are not the result of that, but of thinking differently, which is what we want to do and what we're going to try to do on this leadership weekend. Now, one more I want to show you. I want to kind of model this first session around because I think this is really important. This is, anybody know? This guy is Jeff Bezos. And I like to say that Jeff Bezos thought again or thinks again. It's from the ground up thinking. And when he solved a problem, he basically said, if we could build this whole system again, and knowing what we know about everything else and technology and what's going on right now, how would we build it again? And so he took on the book industry and thought through, instead of why are we shipping giant pallets of really heavy books into giant stores when I can ship one book at a time out of a central location? And he rethought the whole thing in a revolution. We're all Prime members because of the way Jeff Bezos thinks and thinks again. How do I rebuild this thing from the ground up? And that's really what I want us to think about. That's how I want us to think about student ministry. I think it's going to be huge and important. I think we're in a place where it's so hard to work in ministry, and it's finally our opportunity to work on it. So let's step back for a couple of days. Let's think about ministry, and let's think about the way we would rebuild it. Knowing what we know now about developmental psychology, knowing what we know now about how faith works, knowing what we know now know about how kids are walking away from the church and when they're walking away from it, how would we design it? And we're going to have to unknow some things to do that. So here's basically the process for that. We're going to lay the groundwork for our revolution by starting this process. And here's how we start. We take something we love, youth ministry, and we're going to lovingly dismantle it, take all the pieces out. We're going to clean up every piece, and we're going to kind of lay them all out in front of us. And we're going to put it all back together again in a way that makes sense. In fact, I hope you've been told, but I would love for you to have a stack of 3x5 cards. It doesn't have to be 3x5. It can be any sort of card. It could be pieces of paper you've cut up. But the point is, I want to be able to put a couple of things on this piece of paper, put it all out in front of us, and move the things around. So that's really the point. So with that, our first assignment, and this is going to be a bit of a hands-on workshop this first session. We're going to work either by ourselves or in groups on these things. And so I want to spend about 10 minutes. It may take you more, it may take you less. It doesn't matter. You're going to hit pause and take as long as you need. But I want you to write down all the things you have to do or wish you could do or think you should do over a week and a month in youth ministry. And again, if you're alone, still do it. If you're in a group, go ahead and do this together. So for example, I gave some examples of the first few that came to mind. For instance, prepare a message. It's one of the things I had to do on a weekly basis because I was going to have to do a message in youth ministry. That may or may not be true for you, but I'm just giving some examples. I may have needed to have coffee with a prospective volunteer where I was going to go interview that person. I had to go to staff meeting, good or bad, usually pretty good. I had to do that. My least favorite thing in the world, I had to turn in receipts. I had maybe volunteer meeting content. One of the things that kept coming up for me was, I've got the volunteers together this week. What am I going to tell them? How can I help them? And then also, one of my favorites, you get to call a parent. Those are usually good things. So those are just some examples. Now there's 100 of those things, and that's what I want you to do is just kind of rapid fire, put one thing on every card, and I want you to lay them all out in front of you. But before we do, some of you are thinking, you know what, Chef? I'm at a small ministry, like a real small one. In fact, I don't have volunteers. I am all things. And here's what I'd like to say to you, and I want to challenge you on that. Youth ministry is a burnout job. You will burn out unless you take care of yourself and unless you get help. It should not be done alone. So you need volunteers. You need people who are working with you. In fact, I tell people all the time that if you have more than 5 students on your rosters and more than one gender, you need help. You need small group. If you're a guy, you need a female to be the small group leader for the females. If you're a female, you need a guy to be the small group leader for the guys. And while we're on that, I actually think that small group leaders and youth leaders or youth ministry leaders are 2 very important separate characters that need to be separate people. In fact, in the story of a developing adolescent, I feel like they need those characters. They need a small group leader or 2 or 3, and they need a youth leader. And those are separate characters. So don't gyp your kids by just doing it all by yourself. The more relationships working for the kids' betterment, the better. So I really want you to do that. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and dive in here. 5 to 10 minutes. get your 3x5 cards and start to throw them out. I am going to step off of camera for a second so you can hit pause and not look at my face, pause in a weird way. And then I'm going to come back on in a second and I'm going to go from there. So in just a second, go ahead and hit pause. Ready? Steady. Go. All right, how'd it go? We've got it all dismantled. We've kind of taken all of our parts and we've laid them all out in front of us, and I'm hoping you're looking at a sea of cards of all the things that you have to do. And now I want to take a few minutes to puddle them together. Puddle, like a mud puddle. And when I puddle, I mean I'm start throwing cards into stacks kind of based on categories. I think that will be interesting. So for instance, if I have a card that says prepare my message, which I do, and I have a card that says pick worship songs, if you have a worship band and that's one of the things, I would probably put those into a puddle and I'd name that puddle programming. I think that might help. So that's all we're doing right now is you're taking all those cards, looking at all the things you do, and I want you to puddle them into 5 or 6 different puddles. Don't have more than that. Don't get too specific. Don't overthink it. Like, what are the big buckets of what you work on in ministry? Take a few minutes to do that. Ready? Steady, and go. All right. I hope that went well for you. I hope you're looking at, all of your buckets and that you've got it to a place where you can see really the big things that we do. I wanted to show you kind of where I ended up. Obviously, I had told you, with a programming puddle, all the things it takes to pull off Sunday programming. I also put a pile together called Got to Do Stuff, and those are the receipts, the staff meetings, the things I just have to do whether I want to or not. That's just part of it. I've got a parents card because I'm calling parents back. I'm thinking about how to communicate with parents, what I need or what they're going to do this week, and camps coming up, all of that good stuff. I have 2 cards for volunteers. I have volunteer recruitment and volunteer culture. Volunteer recruitment and volunteer culture. And basically, recruiting's like getting elected president, and culture is like being president. They're 2 separate jobs. Finding volunteers and keeping volunteers growing are 2 separate, really important jobs. And when I look at what I have to do, is a lot of it is recruiting volunteers. It's usually seasonal, and although I never quit. Anybody I meet, I'm going to ask to be a volunteer if I think they could be. And then culturally is kind of something I'm working on all the time, thinking about our volunteer culture and how to keep people doing the same thing. So that's what I ended up with. I hope yours was somewhat similar. And if we were together, it'd be really cool to hear what you had to say. But since we can't do that, I'll move on. We've got it lovingly disassembled, right? We've dismantled it, and we've kind of put it into these big categories. And now I want to try to think differently. Now I want to think like Bezos thinks. Now I want to ask the question, like, if we were to rebuild this thing, knowing what we know now about kids and students and their minds and their faiths and this world, how would we build it? Because we just never really know, just like selling books, we never really know why we're still doing things because of the way it was in the old days. Well, now we've got new opportunities. So when you're building something, the most important place to start is answering the question, what do you want this thing to do? I mean, what is the objective of great youth ministry? And you don't have to think too much about it, because Jesus actually answered that question for us in Matthew 28. He's very direct, and he gave us our marching orders when he said, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you until the end of the age. It's one of my favorite verses because it's so direct and it's so clear. And I want to jump into this verse a little bit, and I want to pause because I'm nervous. Every time I'm talking to different denominations about, what I think a Bible verse means or something like that, it always makes me a little bit nervous. So I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to just ask for that you just go with me and think about it for a little bit as I dig in, because I believe the Bible's without errors. I'm not so sure that our translations are without errors, and I can guarantee you that my own personal view of Scripture isn't without errors. And so I'm going to dig into this, but I do think it does lay out a clear idea of what youth ministry should be. The word go can be translated not just 3, 2, 1, bang, go, but also as you're going. So it's this go, get started, and keep going while you're doing it. This idea that we're going to walk and do these things. Well, what things? Well, we're going to make disciples. We're going to disciple people. And disciple for Jesus is not a noun. Disciple is a verb. It's walking with people and helping them develop into followers of Jesus over time. It's relational. It's deeply relational. In fact, people ask me all the time about relational discipleship, and I'm like, what other kind of discipleship is there? So we're supposed to go and keep going, creating disciples by baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, baptism's always tricky when talking to denominations, but I really want you to think through the idea of baptism more like baptizo, more like John the Baptist was baptizing. If you were walking down the street and saw this ceremony happening, you wouldn't think it's strange because it was very common. It was a ceremony that was a public declaration of a new association, and people would do it all the time. People would do it many times as they changed associations with different things. And so to see it happening wasn't strange. The unique thing was, with John the Baptist was they were publicly declaring a new alignment with Jesus. And I believe that's something that we need to do once. And it's also something that we need to do kind of every day. We need to find a way to publicly declare our allegiance or alliance with Jesus and his teachings. And that's exactly what we're teaching. We're teaching them the teachings of Jesus, not just by our words and with our actions. So we're going to go, and as we're going, create disciples or help our students become followers of Jesus by helping them align with Jesus, by teaching them the teachings of Jesus, not just in our words, but by the way we live. And that's what a great student ministry should do. So with that being said, and what we need to do, and you having 5, 6, 7 giant puddles of things we do in front of us, here's my question for you. If we could just do one of those puddles to help us do what Jesus asked us to do for our kids. And again, this is a mental exercise, okay? I'm just trying to help us rebuild and think differently and think like revolutionaries. Like if we can only do one, this is just mental. We of course can do more than one, but if we could only do one of those puddles, let me ask you, which one would it be? What of those would have the most impact over time? And what of those puddles would be the one thing that would give the ministry the best chance to respond and walk with students, to go as you're going, as they learn, as they start to own their own faith in this world where there are lots of questions? What one puddle would be the best way to do that? Discuss that, think about that, and decide on that. And I will give you a minute or two to do that. I'll be right back. All right. What did you decide? Gosh, I wish I was in the room. It would be fun to have this conversation. It always is. And but I'm not. So with that, I want you to keep that to yourself just for now. And I want to move on to the second part of our discussion. And this is very simple. If you could do 2, obviously you can do more than 2, but if you could only do 2 puddles, if we could add one to this next one of those 5 puddles, which one would it be? Now have that discussion, and I will be right back. All right. Now, obviously, I feel like you can see what I'm having to do. As we're rebuilding, what we're actually doing is kind of deciding what are the most important things to work on in our ministry. And you're putting them in an order. All of them are important. Every single one of those puddles is important, but I'm trying to force you to think differently and to rebuild it. Now, obviously, we can keep going, and I could put those 5 or 6 or 7 things, whatever your puddles are, in order. I always like to just ignore this one because we got to do it, the got to do stuff no matter what. But strategically, what are those most important things? So we're not going to do that anymore, but I hope that mental exercise helped you kind of think through as we rebuild it and think about our daily work in a revolutionary way, which should be super ideal. We put everything into order, and this is an actual exercise that I did with my directors at the different campuses at North Point years ago. We had all of those cards, hundreds of cards spread out all over a pool table, and it began our discussion. And I really wanted to go through really what we decided and how it worked. So here is what we decided. If we could do one thing, what would it be? Any guesses? Here's what we decided. We decided if we can find great people to walk beside kids for a season, that would give us the ability to truly disciple and to go as you're going to make disciples of students. Now, of course, it's important, the theology, of course, there needs to be a teacher. But again, it's a mental exercise. Like, what would give us the best chance to get the most kids, to help build and grow kids with authentic faith? We just thought, you know what? If we could put great Christians in the lives of every student, that would be the best way to do it. In fact, we argued about it for the next few months, and we wordsmithed it, and we basically had this sentence. We called this our most redemptive to-do. In fact, we came up with 4 most redemptive to-dos, and they're in order for a reason. And we call this one leaders. We provide every student exceptional small group leaders to walk with them for a season. Meaning, if I only have so many hours this week, what's the most important thing I could do? I can find a great leader that will walk with kids relationally and disciple them as you go. Now, of course, we can do more than just that. So we asked the tougher question. Okay, of the rest of the puddles, what is the second most important thing? And I was surprised to find this, but we decided that it was still the volunteers, that if we could create a culture in which growing Christians can grow Christians, if we can create a culture that helps leaders become better leaders, that would actually be the thing that helps a kid grow in their faith more than anything else. And we called it culture. So it was leaders, culture, and we wrote this sentence: we provide an esteemed culture. We wanted volunteers all over the church to look at our volunteers and think, that's the special forces. That group of people are doing some really good work. We want to provide an esteemed culture in which leaders are valued, inspired, and equipped to grow and therefore lead. And so that was really the sentence. That was the most important redemptive to do, the second most important redemptive to do. And then we got to this one. This was our third most important one, programming. Now, this is interesting because I think most of the time when you ask a youth worker what they do, this is what you imagine, is they're working on their program, they're doing their sermons, they're playing their games, they're that sort of thing. And it is important. But I think what I learned out of this exercise, this revolutionary thought, is that programming is not the point of ministry. Programming is a tool in ministry to do what? To help our volunteers, both culturally and to be a magnet for people to come to it. And so what we created with programming, or what we decided, the sentence we came up with was leaders, culture, program. And in program, we wrote this sentence: we create shared quality experiences built around biblical truth for small group leaders and their students. So the idea that we're not programming to kids, we're programming to small group leaders. And though we're talking to kids, the direct beneficiary of my talk is the kid, but it's also the small group leader. In that, in some ways, I'm setting the small group leader up for success in that discipleship deal. I mean, I've gone to seminary. I can handle the biblical truth, but now I'm going to let you sit with a kid and a student and wrap that truth around their lives, whether they're a 6th grade boy or an 11th grade girl, who can't be more different, right? And so that was our idea, that this was the third most important redemptive to do. And the last conversation was super, super powerful, and we decided it was parents. And we actually argued that parents might not even be in this list. Though it is the most important thing a kid can have when it comes to their faith, parents are going to be the number one spiritual influence in a kid's life, good or bad, no matter what. The reason we almost didn't put it on our list is because we can't control if a parent takes advantage of that or not. I mean, we're only 50%. We do everything we can. And if a parent doesn't take advantage of it, there's nothing we can do. In fact, I talk to people all the time and I say it's the 20-60-20 rule. That 20% of your parents are going to do everything you ask them to do. 20% are never going to do one of the things you said. So when you're trying to communicate with parents to do something, you're really trying to move that middle 60% to do something. And it's just the reality of what it is. So we can do everything we can. The way we said that was with parents, the way we crafted our sentences, we create opportunities for parents to leverage the ministry. That's it. We can do our part, and they've got to do their part. So I hope that helps. I hope that the mental exercise of thinking differently helps when we're going to be a revolutionary and change the way we do ministry. And I think a revolution in student ministry is going to start really not by focusing on the students, though it's really important, and not by focusing on the program, although it's really important. I think a revolution is going to start when we realize our primary stewardship is not our teaching. Our primary stewardship is not my behavior or even the room in the ministry I've created. My primary stewardship is that I'm the gatekeeper for the characters in the story of a kid's faith and life, or a student's faith and life. And it's my stewardship to allow the right people and not allow the wrong people to be a part of their ministry. And then it's my stewardship to set those people up for success in their relational discipleship, right? Redundant discipleship of a student as they grow. So with that, I hope that helps. I hope it helps you think differently about this revolution. And I hope that you're noodling this for the next few hours until we meet again. We're going to dive into the fact of finding these volunteers, training these volunteers, making sure that the kids are safe in the midst of all of that, as well as what this new digital age and this new reality of ministry looks like and how it looks in the future. But until then, thanks so much for hanging out, and I hope this helps. See you, man. And ladies.
What a great first session. We hope you have been challenged to think through your most redemptive to-dos. Chef challenged us to deconstruct and rethink our ministries. What are we doing? Who are we doing it for? And most importantly, what is the result we want? All the stuff we do is just the means by which we can disciple young people into a closer relationship with Jesus. We have one more question for you to think about tonight. What can we do to create an environment in which discipleship can take place? Have a great night, and we'll see you all tomorrow morning.